pleased now to be joined by Matt Verderame, who has a podcast called Stacking the Box. He's a national NFL writer for FanSided. Matt, what's going on? Thanks for being with me.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
First of all, just want to give the podcast a little bit of love. Tell people where they can find it. And I'm assuming that it's all NFL as your national guy.
It is. It's all 32 teams. It's everywhere you can find podcasts. So iTunes, Apple Play, Spotify, you name it. It's there. I do it once a week. It's live on YouTube as well. So easy to find.
Okay. Want to just kind of go around the league, start with some of the stuff that you've been writing on FanSided. I know you have some power rankings that came out. What's the biggest, most intriguing storyline, in your opinion, heading into Week 18?
Well, I think it's probably whether or not the Raiders or the Chargers make the playoffs. You know, the Raiders, it felt like they were dead in the water a month ago. They've gone through so much this year, and now all of a sudden they're winning in, and it's a home game in prime time. I think it might be a defining game, really, for Rich Bisaccia, who is the interim head coach. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? If they win that game, it feels hard to remove him. And then for the Chargers, they're a team that early in the year some people thought might be the best in the AFC. They struggled. Now they're trying to get back and get into the postseason, where I think they can be really dangerous if they get there. So there's a lot to look at. You know, the Niners are trying to make it in the NFC. The Saints hoping they can sneak in. But I think that Raiders-Chargers Sunday night game is going to be fascinating.
Would the Niners be the most surprising postseason cut, in your opinion?
Yeah, look, you know, they put themselves in a spot here. They've got to beat the Rams on the road. Now, they've beaten them 5 times in a row. They own the Rams, but they're also dealing with injuries at the quarterback position. You know, this is a team where Garoppolo may or may not be able to play. He's dealing with that torn ligament in his thumb, the chip bone. Trey Lance got better as he went along against Houston, but if he plays against the Rams, he's going to have to be good the whole game. They're not going to be able to get off to a slow start. So if they don't get in, it's going to be sorely disappointing for any Niners fan, because that's a team that it looked as though as the year went on, they were just getting better and better and better.
And when you think about different offenses that might be struggling, a lot of focus obviously on Tampa with who they don't have, drama around Antonio Brown and Godwin's absence. But across the league, which offenses concern you in terms of productivity heading into the postseason that might surprise some people?
You know, I think when you really look at the Bills, that's an offense that I think is just very one-dimensional. It's very talented at times, but it's one-dimensional. Allen has been the engine for them all year on the ground and obviously with his arm. Stephon Diggs is amazing. He's a great player. But last year, they also had Cole Beasley, who earned second-team All-Pro honors. This year, he doesn't have 700 receiving yards. Emmanuel Sanders started off really well. He has not had over 30 yards, I believe, since October. So it's been challenging for them to really get going. They don't run the ball particularly well unless Allen's carrying it. So I do worry about them. And then with the Bucs, as you mentioned, look, they're without Antonio Brown now, who they've moved on from. Godwin's hurt. I think it's easier for teams to double Mike Evans and say, go ahead and beat us anywhere else. Try to challenge us down the field. That said, both those teams have great quarterbacks, so can they overcome it? Possibly, but I don't think either one has anywhere near the offensive firepower they did a year ago.
I'm confused about this situation with Antonio Brown, Matt, because, you know, obviously after the game, it was clear that he was cut, but he's still on the roster. You've got his camp, you know, trying to push an injury narrative, and we all saw what happened on the field. I mean, help me understand what the latest situation actually is with him in Tampa.
Well, as of right now, he's not been released yet. Now, Bruce Arians, the head coach over there, said after Sunday's win over the Jets that he is not part of the Bucs anymore. He's not going to be there. However, he's not been released. And I think the reason he hasn't been released is there's a belief by some in league circles that if he's cut, another team will sign him. And he would be eligible for the playoffs and everything else. And so I think if you're Tampa Bay, do you want to release him and give another team the opportunity to bring him aboard? Probably not. Look, for all of his issues, he is very talented. He's only played in 7 games this year. He was injured, but he has over 500 receiving yards. So I think for the Bucs, the best course of action is to just suspend him without pay, conduct detrimental to the team, and then deal with all the ramifications of that in the offseason. Look, whether or not he was injured and didn't want to play because of that kind of remains an unknown. As you mentioned, that's kind of what his side of the story is. The Buccaneers are saying more, hey, look, he just walked off, he quit. You You don't know the answer, but what you do know is even if he was hurt, I don't know that you would ever see a player just storm off the field. It feels like that would just be an argument, a disagreement on the sideline. So he's in the wrong either way. It's just a question of whether or not he was, sort of provoked to be in the wrong, or he's just completely out of line.
This might be a stupid question, but I mean, is it legally possible or plausible for the team to not release him, to keep him, to suspend him without pay, and to essentially, hamstring him from going to another team in the playoffs? I mean, what kind of protections would he have against that sort of move, especially with, the head coach making it clear that he'll not be utilized at all in the postseason if he does remain on the team?
Right. Now, he can maybe get himself suspended with pay, but that's about as far as it's going to go. He cannot force his way off that team. He is in a contract. If the Buccaneers do not want to release him, they do not have to. Even if they don't want to play him, even if they say, hey, look, we're not going to give you an active roster spot on game day. We're telling you to stay home. Look, we've seen now it's a totally different situation, but Deshaun Watson this year with the Texans, he is not hurt. They have told him to stay home. He has not played one snap of football. He has not been at a practice for the Texans this year. Now, again, that's different in the sense that he's dealing with 22 civil suits for alleged sexual assault. It's a totally different backstory. But the idea remains the same, that the team controls the player's rights. And so Brown can't force his way off the team. Maybe he can get it so it's a suspension with pay, and then the Bucs can try to go after that later. But I think if you're Tampa, why release him and let him go, potentially to the Packers or the Rams or somebody who you might see in the playoffs?
Yeah, I want to be sensitive to whatever mental issues he may or may not be dealing with, because it seems like that's a part of this as well. And it's interesting to me that the Bucs locker room has been so quiet, with the exception of the mouthpiece Tom Brady saying that he deserves a lot of empathy. When you look at his skill set but everything that comes with him. I mean, he's not free from sexual assault allegations as well. Clearly, he needs a lot of structure and management, and a lot of teams have taken a chance on him. I mean, is there any reason to think that his playing days are done, or are there still going to be teams even into next season that are willing to take a risk and bring him onto their roster because, as you say, he's still able to be a productive player?
He is, and he's 33 years old, so he's on the proverbial back nine of his career, but he is still very talented. He was on pace for over 1,000 yards. Last year, he came in mid-season for Tampa Bay and helped them win a Super Bowl. He had a touchdown catch in the Super Bowl. I always believe that NFL teams, if they believe there's someone out there that can help them, they will bring them on. They will deal with any PR hit. They don't care. I mentioned Watson earlier. Again, a totally different deal. But the Dolphins were reportedly trying to trade for him in the middle of the season if they could get pick protections from the NFL. So teams will do whatever it takes to win, because that's the coin of the realm in the NFL. And if you don't win, and you don't win quickly, more than ever now, you're not there for very long. And so, look, that all being said, Brown, regardless of whether or not he was dealing with an injury, he quit on the team. He did it in an egregious fashion. He walked off. He was stripping off his uniform on the way out the door. That's a hard thing to come back from. If there's one thing about the NFL, it's always about the team. It's about winning. It's about culture. And that doesn't mean he won't get signed, but that's a tough one to come back from. Of course, this is the same guy who did everything he could to get out of the Raiders organization, and the Patriots immediately picked him up, and he was there for 13 days and left in disgrace, and that didn't stop him from coming back. So as long as he can catch a football, there's always a chance he's going to be on another team.
Is Aaron Rodgers the undisputed MVP in your opinion, Matt?
I think he's the MVP, yeah. You know what? My case that I've laid out is I do think he's undisputed. Now, there will be people who say, well, what about Tom Brady? What about Jonathan Taylor, who's had a great year with the Colts? Even few people throw out Joe Burrow or Cooper Kupp, all of which have had phenomenal years. But Rodgers, he's putting up all the touchdown passes, and he's doing it without any of the interceptions. I mean, that's the thing to me, whether it's Burrow or Mahomes or Brady. There have been some picks here and there, certainly guys who have had all-pro caliber years, but Rodgers has thrown 4 interceptions. That is remarkable, considering when you watch them, how often he's charged with basically leading them down the field. Yes, they run the ball decently with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, But Rodgers, look, it's Devontae Adams in the passing game and not much else. Robert Tunyon's been out since he blew out his knee against Arizona. They don't have another receiver on the outside that you would call a star player. The offensive line's been in flux all year, and yet they just keep winning. They're going to be the number 1 seed again, second year in a row. Brady's the only other guy I think you could really make a case for. I get Taylor and Kupp, but if you're not a quarterback in this league, you're really just going to have a very, very hard time winning that award. The position of quarterback is of so outsized importance, more than it ever has been. So while Brady's had a great year, and he's thrown for a lot more yards. In fact, he's thrown for about 1,000 more yards. Rodgers has been so efficient and so great and so phenomenal at avoiding turnovers and mistakes. I believe he's the MVP.
And in your opinion, should that be a statistical evaluation only? I mean, are there going to be voters who are going to look at the narrative surrounding his holistic approach to health, his COVID drama, and say, you know what, he didn't really put them in position to be as successful with all of that? And how much should that sort of count towards the overall picture compared to a guy like Tom Brady, who saved them at the end of multiple fourth quarters over the course of the season and has largely been, nothing but a cheerleader for the franchise and stayed out of drama like he usually does?
No, it's a fair point. And a Chicago-based MVP voter mentioned on the radio earlier this week that he won't vote for Rodgers because of his feelings about who he is as a person. Now, I don't vote for the MVP. If I did, like I said, I would vote for Rodgers, even though I do disagree with his personal stances on some of the things he's talked about. I do think some of this stuff with COVID-19 and the misinformation about it is unseemly. But in the end, I do think you have to vote on it based on who the player is on the field. And Rodgers has been brilliant. Now, Brady's been great, and Rodgers did miss a game because he was unvaccinated. He missed a game earlier this year against Kansas City, which they lost. But it ultimately didn't hurt them. They're the number 1 seed. They are where they are. I think if you took an average quarterback and put them on the Bucs, that team's probably still a playoff team. Might even still win that division. If you put an average quarterback on the Packers with that offense, I think they struggle to make the playoffs. Now, again, maybe that division is so weak they find a way to win 9 games, something like that. But I think Rodgers just adds so much to them. If they don't have Rodgers, I don't know that they're anywhere near the level of the team they are now, where I do think the supporting cast in Tampa is still really good. Obviously hurt a little bit lately with Godwin and Brown. But ultimately, I think if you're voting on the MVP, you have to vote on what you see between the lines. And while Rodgers has certainly been nothing but a distraction off the field since the offseason, he's been a beacon of light for Green Bay, honest.
Yeah, that's a great point, Matt. Just lastly, looking at your power rankings, you have Kansas City right underneath the Packers, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that they're number 2. Their road got a little bit harder after week 17, but why do you feel that they deserve that ranking right underneath the Packers in your power rankings this week?
I had them there before the week, and then they lose to Cincinnati on a last-second field goal. And I think, I thought about moving them down, but if you asked me who I think is coming out of the AFC, I think it's Kansas City, even though they lost that game. And so I decided to keep them there. The Titans, I believe, are underrated. Nobody's giving them any respect. The Titans have beaten the Chiefs, the Bills, the Rams, the Niners, the Colts twice. I mean, they're a very good football team. I just worry about Tannehill against some of these upper echelon quarterbacks in the playoffs. A couple of years ago, he did go into Foxborough and beat Brady. He went into Baltimore and beat Jackson. But in both of those games, he really had to do nothing. If you look at his statistics, he barely threw for 100 yards. And so I wonder in those spots, if he faces Mahomes again in the playoffs, if he faces Josh Allen or even Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, can he go toe-to-toe? I don't know that he can. I will say this, though. I think the AFC is as wide open as it's been in a long time. I do believe the Chiefs are the favorite. If they play their best, I think they'll get there. I think they'll get back to the Super Bowl for a 3rd straight year. But that's hard. Not a lot of teams go to a Super Bowl for 3 straight years. In fact, the only teams that have ever done it are the Dolphins in the 70s, the Bills in the 90s, although they didn't win any, and then the Patriots from 2016 to 2018. That's it. That's the whole list in NFL history. So history says somebody else will get there. But I think the Chiefs deserve that number 2 spot because if you look at the totality of the AFC, I think they're the best team in it.
That's great stuff from Matt Verderame. Stacking the Box podcast, available on all platforms. Make sure you give that a listen for sure. Matt, thanks. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely, Carolyn. Anytime.